The vice chair of the full committee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Style. Dr. Lau, we're talking about sandboxes. Do you have anything? I know have been commenting on this in the past. So do you have anything additional thoughts that you would like to?
Definitely, we are we are actually participants in the Singapore AI sandbox that they've set up, the AI Verify Foundation. And it's actually been working exceedingly well in the sense that these types of government agencies, they need to bring the latest technologies to actually evaluate the latest risks that are emerging with AI agents and new AI technologies. And so by bringing in innovative technologies to do that type of red teaming and testing, they're able to stay ahead. Think about here in the US where we have regulatory agencies that are still being educated about the technology, whereas in Singapore, they're able to unleash a lot more in terms of AI potential through bringing in new technology to test and evaluate it. So I think there's a lot of benefits there. And also to the point that Congressman Lynch mentioned around scalability, red teaming is a very labor-intensive problem, right? So you have thousands of tests that enterprises have to perform. If the federal agencies can provide more guidance and tooling around that, it's going to accelerate AI adoption.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Staying with you here, we often hear of an AI arms race with China that, if lost, would threaten U.S. national security and the United States' global economic dominance. In your opinion, is the United States currently, how are we currently faring, I guess, in this arms race, and are we failing at it? If so, how? And more importantly, how can Congress and the U.S. government writ large ensure that the United States outpaces China in the AI space?
I think there's been different paradigms emerging here. One is where you have a federal government that can choose and pick and invest in winners in this space versus creating an open marketplace where different, say, large language model providers or vendors can compete within this marketplace, right? And I think what we're seeing when we talk to folks within the DoD or Department of War now, we see actually a movement towards opening up these marketplaces where many different vendors can compete and the best solution rises to the top. Again, I'll move back where actually evaluating which are the best solutions for use cases that is going to drive America's national security interests really comes down to, can we do the right evaluation of those large language model providers or vendors? And so combining open marketplaces that foster innovation, allow different folks to compete, and then we get to choose the best ones for our use cases is absolutely essential here for us to be competitive in this arms race you're talking about.
By the way, I deeply appreciate how you are succinctly wrapping up some very complicated and detailed things and allowing me 2 minutes yet to ask other questions. So it's important up here when we only get 5 minutes. Mr. Gorfine, I want to talk a little bit about the impact of U.S. regulation and how it may threaten the use of AI in financial services space. You know, we had the SEC's predictive data analytics proposal under the Gensler SEC, I believe would have had some significant impact. You know, are there other things like that we need to make sure that we're aware of and avoiding?
Yeah, so I appreciate you raising the predictive data analytics rule. I mean, that was rescinded, and I think that was an example of a
rightly so, but
rightly so.
As we saw with that SEC chair, he was expansive in his pursuit of covering every territory he possibly could.
Right, and I would agree, it was not technology neutral, and that should be kind of a guiding principle. It had incredibly broad...
So it should be tech neutral.
Absolutely should be technology neutral. And importantly, like the soft power too, in the way that regulators communicate to the marketplace is important. So with the predictive
in other words, you don't want to be pounded into the ground and threatened with being put out of business. That doesn't foster innovation.
That can be a challenge.
Allow the sarcasm to be mine. So that's okay.
That can certainly be a challenging environment. I think especially when you're talking about smaller firms, and when I think about regulatory messaging, it's the small firms, it's the community banks that don't have large armies of compliance teams that are able to parse certain types of messaging that comes from regulators, so it can serve as a big deterrent to adoption.
In the last 30 seconds, how can these smaller community financial, you mentioned community banks or credit unions, how can they use AI to compete?
Well, so I'm a big believer, and I say this in my written testimony, in standard-setting organizations, like industry-driven standards that regulators can effectively recognize or even create safe harbors would allow small firms to know that if you're compliant with these best practices or standards, that is, from a diligence perspective, a route you can pursue. And I think that exploring those types of models in the U.S. is going to be critically important. I realize
Yield back.
time.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back.